creating a culture of love.
Who we are as a one individual person who nobody else can take our place in time or space.
We are almost an impossibility, right? It's impossible for you to be you and me to be me, yet we are here. Because obviously that's possible. But trying to recreate that, there will never be one of us again.
Laughter without love is cruel. It's mean. It breaks up families. It causes wars. But laughter with love is happiness and joy.
Dr. Gladys McGarey, thank you so much for joining us today on Live Through Love. I'm humbled and I'm excited to speak to, you're almost 103 years old. That is amazing. That is a feat.
It's awesome, isn't it?
I'm
impressed.
It's incredible. And I actually walk around with this goal now and I'm like, I want to live to 125. Obviously, as long as I'm healthy and have all my wits about me, or as much of them at that age. But I believe if we choose to be healthy and choose to try to live a long life, we can attain it. And I know longevity runs in my family on both sides. So, maybe one day I'll get to be as lucky as you in that capacity. So thank you so much for joining us. Yes. Let's do it. So quickly, we're just going to just dive right into some of these questions. And in today's crazy world, everyone is trying to combat anti-aging and biohacking and longevity. And, you see some of the mega millionaires spending millions of dollars on all this new science and technology. And one day we will probably get to the point where we can use a lot of that science. But what would you say is the secret to living a long and fulfilling life? And what do you believe has contributed most to your longevity and well-being?
You have to have a purpose. You have to have something to live for. And if you're so afraid of what's going on in the world, it's very hard to get yourself juiced up enough to really want to do it. It's what we want to do that we'll work hard for. And it's the reality of the fact that life has to move. And if we get stuck any place, life will get stuck because it has to move. Like all energy has to move, and life is energy. And if it's going to have any energy at all, it has to keep moving. And that means our body has to move, our mind has to move, but our spirit has to move. Our very inner core. I was doing a lecture for my son in Austin, Texas a few years back, and one of the other speaker was from Wales. And she said when she introduced herself, because my son had introduced himself as coming from a weird family. So she said, in Wales, when we get up in the morning, we don't say to each other, good morning. We say, how's your weird? Because the weird is that inner aspect of ourself that knows how we are. So I think it's that kind of a awareness of who we are as a one individual person who nobody else can take our place in time or space.
Yeah, wow.
We have a job to do.
We do. And owning that, if we look at science and we unpack science and God and universe and all this energy that's out and about us, we are almost an impossibility, right? It's impossible for you to be you and me to be me, yet we are here because obviously
Yeah.
that's possible. But trying to recreate that, there will never be one of us again.
Uh-uh.
You know, our offspring's the closest in resemblance, but they're their own thing.
Yeah.
So
And
being
they'd
you,
better be their own thing.
oh
They
yeah,
need that's what they need to do is claim who they are. It's in my mind it's kind of like this huge jigsaw puzzle, and every piece in that jigsaw puzzle is its no one else can fit in that place. I've
hmm
tried. You can pound all it won't go. It has to fit in that one spot. And so when we find our spot, we if we can appreciate it and look around and see the wonder of the world of the at this time, at this moment, how awesome is that? I mean, it's appreciating the very fact we can take a deep breath,
mm.
and then we can take a step, and that this next step comes before the next step. It's the awareness of the actual movement of time and space and so on.
No, it's true. And I always say it's a constant forward motion, right? We
That's
learn,
if that's what we want to do. Yeah.
yeah, because if we sit in like a failure, we're gonna just wallow in it and think we're failures. But if we take a failure and learn from it, it's actually a step towards success, right? So that's moving forward and keeping us moving forward.
Yeah, we can keep looking over our shoulder at what we did wrong or what's wrong with the world or whatever is going on back there. If
Mm-hmm.
we keep doing that, we're going to get a stiff neck and we'll never get able to move it. But
The
if we can
crick in
move
your,
our heads forward and look up, we'll do what E.T. did, home. We
yeah.
reach for the stars, we reach for the light. That's what we're intended to do.
And live in
But we can do what
possibility.
we want to. We can look back there and do that. That's what appeals to you.
Yeah, and the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, or the living in regret, that just
Yeah,
doesn't even become an option because we're looking forward.
yeah.
So, you know, looking back, what would you consider are some of the most significant changes in the world during your lifetime, and how have these changes shaped your perspective on life? So, call it 80 years ago, 50 years ago, 70 years ago, where you are today. I'm sure you've seen like so much history and technology, but is there one thing that you can say, here's the through line, and how have you seen these shifts in perspective and changes?
Oh, there's a shift and change every moment of my life. So I can't identify a specific one, but I can tell you when I was a kid, there were no phones. There was no electricity. My parents were medical missionaries in northern India, and they took
Wow.
their medical work out into the jungles. And so for me, growing up that way, it was bliss. I mean, I could run around and play with the village kids and kids in our compound and all of that. And it was just, there were no particular rules for what had to be done. This is before school, things change. But at that point, when we were out in the jungles of North India, I thought it was life was really good. The Indian kids would rub my arms and try to get the white off, to make them the right color.
Yeah, that's
And
funny.
but that was the fun of we were all doing what we were wanting to do and so on. So it was great. But that reality of at that time not even having any electricity to work with, the cook did all our work, cooking out in a little stove. Well, it wasn't a stove; it was rocks put out around and that kind of thing. And it was that's the way it worked.
Hmm.
My mother called it make do. You do what you can. And so, actually, when we started school and went to school, Woodstock School in North India, which had been there for 200 years and had grown from a little uh, small school to really quite a amazing place. But during even that time, and so that was in 1926 when I started school. But even in that time, my oldest brother had was our home was um, a mile up the mountain, and it was 1,000-foot drop. So we
Oh, wow.
climbed that every day. But my oldest brother was older than I was, and he had met a lady that he wanted to date, but he had no way of getting any kind of a message to her because she was in language school down at the school,
Hmm.
and he was up at our house, and there was no. He could stand up on the a hillside like the other messengers were done and call for a coolie. So somebody would stand up there and say, "Oh, coolie," and they get a mountain somewhere else. That's the way we had of connecting. But my dad had trained these black Labrador dogs that we had,
Hmm.
and they were hunting dogs, and they were trained. My dad had trained them so well that when my brother wanted to get connect with his lady, he wrote a note on a piece of paper and tucked it in the dog's collar and
Hmm.
said to the dog, "Take to Ada." And the dog would run down the hill and go to the school, and the nurses down there would be watching or look out, and they'd say, "Ada, your mailman here." Mailman's here. And so she'd come out and get the note, write an answer, and say to the dog, "Take to John," and it would go up the hill. You did, really, like my mother said, you make do. You find out what works, and that's what you do. Now that's
No,
that's how love got started for going for them.
yeah, and being resourceful, right?
Oh, use the juice that you got.
No, exactly. Um, so I mean, you've seen it all. You've seen the shifts in technology. You've seen the changes in everything, and I want to dive into the power of love. I heard you say that you believe love is one of the most powerful medicines on earth,
The most powerful.
the most powerful, and that's I run around the world painting it. In your extensive medical and holistic practice, um, have you observed any connections between the presence of love, strong relationships, and increased longevity? And can you share some examples or insights of love in action?
Well, love could get stuck any place, and then it can't. Well, if it can't move, it gets stuck. And so, and as long as love is moving, there is something happening. There's the energy of in the universe that is going on, that is healing. I think that I want to answer this a little sideways. I think that our concept of medicine is kind of twisted because of the way life has gone.
Mm-hmm.
I've lived through how many world wars? I mean, really, the world, and here we are again.
Mm-hmm.
It's that aspect of life that gets stuck, and then we start killing each other, and we start
Mm.
doing horrible things to each other, which destroys our very essence, not just the person that we're angry with or whatever.
Yeah.
It destroys our juice and what we're trying to do. So I think that it's really important that, see, when I started medical school, the dean sent me to the psychiatrist several times because she didn't think I had the right attitude towards what medicine was all about.
Mm.
Because I didn't think that our primary purpose was to kill diseases and help eradicate pain. My attitude, because I'd watched what my parents had done. They were doctors. They were osteopathic doctors. They loved the people. They worked with the people. They did what they did, and it was all done in, without a lot of equipment. And now I was in medical school, and I was learning a lot about what the science of medicine was, and the science of our body, and what our mind was. But no, nothing was done about what I really had understood was what my parents were doing, which was loving the people. And so the psychiatrist sent me back and said I was okay, and so I was able to keep going in
Yeah.
medical school, and I graduated. But it was that it's the problem is for me is that in medicine we still think that that's our primary object is to eradicate pain, and it's a war against disease and pain. And I don't think that war does anything to move the human race forward.
Mm-hmm.
I think there are times when you have to stand up for what you believe. That's different from going out and actually hating the people or the whatever it is saying the opposite. You know, people we have choice. So it's a that kind of a well. We started the American Holistic Medical Association because we were saying these things about no, it's love and caring about things and work, reaching to where the patient is hurting and asking them what they feel. My eldest son is a retired orthopedic surgeon, and when he'd finished his training in orthopedics and he came through Phoenix, and he said to me, "Mom, I'm real scared. I'm going to have people's lives in my hands. I don't know if I can handle that." And I said to him, "Well, Carl, if you think you're the one that does the healing, you have a right to be scared. But your job is to do this amazing therapeutic thing called orthopedic surgery. Because if I've got something broken in my body, I want a good orthopedic person to be able to do what needs to be done. You have learned this, you know how to do it. If you do it with love, you will be able to contact the physician within that patient. And that's your colleague, because that's the physician that is really going to do the healing. You do what you do, and then your colleague there is going to say, yes, I understand this, and take it on and do the healing. So it's not your job to take on that responsibility. It's the patient's job to introduce themselves to their own healer in a way that they can actually take what you have done and do the healing.
Yeah, no, what I'm hearing there, that's really powerful because in one side, I actually was going to go to medical school and be an orthopedic surgeon at some point. So I have a lot of studies in that. And you hear these stories, the ego gets in the way of doctors and surgeons, and then the type of doctor that you are, and we lose our humility. But what you're saying is, like, if we come from that place of compassion and empathy and love, and we surrender the ego and then empower our patient, right, the person
Right.
being treated,
Right.
to take responsibility for their healing, that doesn't fall on the doctor, because our job is to help guide someone, do our role in it. I'm saying our on one side, but and move
Yes.
forward and make sure that you're a team with the individual, because you don't know what they're going to do at home, right? You
No,
can't take
don't,
everything
you don't
on.
know how they've understood what it is. Another good story right now, because it just happened about a month or so ago. A friend of mine who is a neurologist and just a wonderful guy. He's teaching at the medical school here, and he was to meet a resident at a patient's door. So he came up, and she was waiting at the door of the patient outside, and he said, well, let's go in. And she says, oh, no, we don't need to, she says. And he says, what do you mean we don't need to? She says, well, he has Alzheimer's. He won't understand anything. And my colleague, the neurologist, said, no, you don't understand. In that room, there are two patients. There's the patient and his wife. Now, his wife is going to be able to understand everything that we're saying. She's going to be able to take it in lovingly and then lovingly teach what she learns to her husband so that whatever he can get, he will be able to use and it will make his life better. She's going to be lovingly transporting what we give to them and let him have at least some contact with love. And he said, on top of that, we have to go and touch him. So it's there. It's not that doctors don't understand. It's that we know we as doctors need to be able to teach what the ones who are learning it need to understand. Because if we're telling him that just because he can't understand what we said, or maybe he can, but he can't respond to what we've said, doesn't mean that he isn't there to, as a living soul, living out his own destiny. And our job is to pick up the path that he is traveling and go it with him as far as we can.
Yeah. And I'm hearing stuff. It's basically, how are we empowering people, right? And not taking sole responsibility, but passing responsibility amongst all of us and realizing we're all in on this healing journey, and it doesn't all fall on one person. But we can all lean on love. And love is going to be that unifier that's going to give us patience and compassion and empathy and even forgiveness of self, right? Because I can't imagine going through some of these life-changing situations that happen to a lot of people. And imagine like the amount of resilience that it takes to really forgive and then lean into love.
Yeah. Well, and it takes so many stories to tell the whole thing. Let me tell you another one. My dad, now this is before, I don't remember this, but this is a story he used to tell us. Mm-hmm. When they had first gone out to India and he was going back into the jungle by himself with taking some medical things and so on. He had coolies that were working with him, and they were going through the jungle. They went for 3 days, and at the end of the morning of the fourth day, he gets up and he's from America and he does things on time and all that kind of stuff. It makes a difference, a schedule and so on. And the coolies are all sitting there. And he says, all right, now we got to go. And the coolies are just sitting there. And finally he says, we have to get up and go. And the head coolie says, Sahib, you don't understand. We left our souls a 3 days journey behind us. We have to let our souls catch up with us. So my dad sat down with him and let his soul catch up with him too. Because the coolie taught him a lesson. But he was in the open end of a tunnel, understanding that he could understand what they were saying.
Mm.
And it's that ability to take what comes and make it part of the very essence of our being, so that
Mm.
he taught us that.
Mm. Slow down.
Yeah, coconut time.
Yeah. No, I love these examples because that's how we're gonna learn, and we're gonna learn from these stories. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, because we remember stories. We don't, at least I don't remember statistics. I remember stories.
Yeah, and the stories like because we feelings come through stories and
Oh, yeah.
imagination and storytelling and history and fact and education. So we get a lot of them because the storytelling is something we've been doing for thousands of years too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And they're
So
real.
yeah. So how do you define love?
You know, when I was writing this book, there was a day when the person I was working with at the time, we tried and tried and tried and tried to find the words for love. And we said, songs have been written about it. Books have been written about it. People, since the beginning of time, have trying to be put it into words. We finally realized that there really, unless a person has experienced love, it's very hard for them to understand it. It's like having a person who was born blind and you try to explain that to them the color of green.
Mm.
There are certain things, because he's never experienced it, he would never know the color of green. So if a person has never experienced love, how are they going to know? There aren't words. You have to experience it. It has to move. It has to be real. You have to have touched one another enough to be able to really say, whether you say out loud or whether you say, I don't know what language you say it in or whatever it is. If you're experiencing love and you're sharing it with somebody else and they're experiencing it, no one else can say what that is. Not
Yeah. Also the context of where it's being applied, right? Whether it's a romantic relationship or a father-son, mother-daughter, father-daughter, friendship, business partner, patient, doctor, there's so many layers to it.
and how it's being expressed. It's like when when I was two, the family came home to the States because they had what was called a furlough, a year and a half where they got to come home and see their families and all that kind of stuff. Well, my mother's family, my mother's mother and father had come from Germany right after the war. So they had lived in Cincinnati and had a home in Cincinnati. And so I, as a 2-year-old, went to visit with them. And so my grandmother, who spoke German, and I, as a 2-year-old, was talking Hindustani because that's what I was. That's what I was talking. And so we went down to the basement, and she was doing the wash, and I guess I was sitting there talking away. All of a sudden, she turns around and she says to me, "Do bobble zu viel." And I looked up at her and I said, "Do bobble zu viel yourself." And the two of us walked back up, and she's telling the whole family. So it's become a family story. So it's a loving way of portraying with the family the way in which we were interacting with others. You may not consider that love. It was love. She
Mm.
was accepting this 2-year-old who was sitting there just jabbering away, and I was accepting what she was doing, just jabbering away. And it was, so it's become a family story of how, in unexpected ways, you share love.
Mm. Yeah, it comes out of you. Just you got to be open to accepting it, to giving it, to receiving it, and making sure you're playing on both sides of the street, right? Because some of us can either give it, and forget to fill our own cups. Some people take, and then it gets really hard to receive. And just making sure we live in a balanced uh, reciprocity of both sides of love.
A moving, active force
Mm.
is what it is. And if it's stopped any place, it dies.
Yeah,
I mean, if it's really stopped with fear and hatred and all the other bad stuff.
yeah. And it takes a turn for the dark.
These 5 L's have helped me structure the way in which I can think about love. So the first two go together. They love and life have to function as one unit. It's like a seed in the pyramid. It's there with the energy of 2,000 years in the seed, but it can't do anything until love, in the form of water and air and light, activates it by breaking the shell. So now life can move. So life and love function together. It's like a pregnancy. It's one unit when the baby and the mother are experiencing a pregnancy. So the baby becomes his own person when he takes his first breath. So life and love are a unit until the baby assumes his position, her position in the universe. The next L is laughter. Laughter
Mm.
without love is cruel. It's mean. It breaks up families. It causes wars. But
Mm.
laughter with love is happiness and joy. The fourth L is labor. Labor without love is drudgery. You drag
Mm. Yeah.
yourself through it and you make yourself do it, and it's just hard work and all of that. It's drudgery. But labor with love is bliss. You work twice, 10 times as hard because it's what you really want to do and it makes you feel good. It's just bliss. But labor without love is drudgery. You just kind of drag yourself through it. And the fifth one is listening. Listening with love is understanding. Without
Mm.
love, it's a sounding gong. It just it just doesn't mean anything. And we have the opportunity to either listen with love and take in some of the information that we're giving, or
Mm-hmm.
just not listen to it because we don't understand it and it just goes empty sound. So
Mm-hmm.
these 5 L's for me help to say in action and in experience what love is, which I can't put into words.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm loving this, and it makes total sense because everything you just said, you do the opposite without love, right? Let's say it's fear. And when we act from
Yeah,
fear, that's what drives us toward not understanding, not accepting, using hatred and racism and bigotry and all these things and war, as you stated. And we start going into places of just not operating from our own humanity, right? We
right.
are on this planet to love and be loved, and
That's
that's
right.
it. And
See,
if
I have
go
kind
ahead.
I have kind of a, this is my own thought. It's not a theology or anything, but I think when God, whatever God is to each one of us, created this universe, and it was beautiful, and God said, "Oh, this is really, really nice," and then He created the human being, and He said to us, "Now you're the only living beings on this in this universe who have the option of having free choice and free will. So here now, I give you the option of this whole thing, and I give you dominion over the whole world." And we, in our arrogance, thought he said dominance.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
we
Yeah.
kind of took over and we said we can do anything we want to with this, and da da da. And look what we've done. But when
Yeah.
you have dominion, you're supposed to take care of it. It's we were given dominion over this whole thing because we have the right and option to choose which way we're going to go. And in my experience, when fear steps in, it's very easy for love to step out.
Yeah. It doesn't exist. And it's also not to taboo fear, right? There's some benefits to fear,
Oh, oh,
long to,
oh,
fight or
absolutely.
flight, making sure we don't get injured, protect our children out of survival needs. But operating from fear, like
It's
victimhood and
different.
martyrdom and ego and narcissism, is completely different. That's the fear we're talking about, which is exactly what you just
Right,
stated.
right,
Dominating versus taking dominion, right? Taking
right,
agency over our lives versus giving the agency away.
right. But there are times when humor is the thing that can help you express love to yourself or to other people. When I was 99 years old and I had my 99th birthday party, and I was in the grocery store and I walking out with my grocery basket, and I'm starting to put the things in my car, and an elderly gentleman comes by and he says to me, "Oh, may I help you?" And I said, "No, no, I can do this." And he stands up straight and he says, "Well, I'm 86 years old." And out of my mouth came the words, "Well, I'm 99." And I strutted off and sat down in my car, and I said to myself, "You nasty old lady." He was just trying to be nice, and look at
Yeah.
what you did. You better get up and go back into that grocery store and apologize to him. And then I got to laughing. I got to saying to myself, "No, no, this is two kindergartners having fun, yelling at each other. If you give it a lot of energy, that's going to make it worse."
Hmm.
This way, he can go home and say to his wife, "A nasty old lady said this to me," and he can just handle it. Or I can start laughing at that. And I started laughing, and I was laughing so hard I couldn't start my car because it was.
Hmm.
I said, "This is a comedy scene. It's something that really humor can heal,
Yeah.
not going in and apologizing for something that is really kind of funny. I mean, if you can look at it as being very putting some humor into it, it makes it not bad. It makes it good."
Yeah. I agree. Almost like that self-deprecating twist on there, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
And taking a note into that, what do you think? The world right now, it's like we're all walking on eggshells. You don't know who you're gonna offend, not offend. Like, we can't seem to be getting things right, and we shouldn't be walking on toes. We should be accepting and compassionate and gentle with each other. But, like, what are you seeing, and how have you seen that impact over these 100 years on where the world is right now? Because we can't actually offend people. We could take offense. right? But we're walking
Yeah.
around apologizing for everything now. We apologize for breathing incorrectly, for not using a pronoun, not like we're doing it on purpose. It's just, if you've been wired for grammar for so long, maybe it's going to take a moment to reprogram ourselves to be understanding. We're not all out trying to attack each other.
Well,
What do you say
and you
for that?
know, right, and when we can claim our own importance, it's a very important to claim our own voice and be able to stand up for that. I Here in Phoenix, when we started the American Holistic Medical Association, I was called up several times before the Maricopa County Medical Board because of the things that I was saying and the things I was doing. And so this one time, I've gone in and they've given me my reprimand and chastised me the way they felt I should and all of that. And so I've accepted that, and I have my I reach into my purse and I get my keychain, which is like an instrument. So I had it in my fist, and I walked out with my lawyer into the hall, and one of the doctors came walking up to me, and he says, "Now let me tell you something, honey." Well, boy, that pushed a button in me that I didn't know was there. I turned
Mm-hmm.
around and I took my fist and I pounded him. I said, "You will not call me honey. I'm your peer age-wise and professionally, and you will not call me honey."
Mm-hmm.
And he just kind of wilted and went back in the room. And I looked over at my lawyer, who was doubled up against the wall laughing. He was he was just he was So I came home and I told my daughter, who was my partner, and I told her, and she says, "Oh, Mom, you didn't." But I did. He really, it was he'd crossed a line that
Yeah.
I didn't. 3 years later, I was called back in and had a reprimand, and he was nice as pie. You know,
Mm.
there are times when you have to stand up for you.
Mm-hmm.
And this was not only an insult, it was something that I just wasn't going to accept.
Yeah. No, and
So
it's
that
up to you, right? That's your agency
yeah,
and your
it's a
power and your
choice.
leadership. Yeah. And that's the thing, is we get to stand up for ourselves. Sometimes we stand up for others and forget to stand up for ourselves.
It's
And we,
very
we, we
easy.
don't, hmm
Yeah,
and we don't see
yeah,
that that is a difference and there is a gap there.
yeah.
And that's the big difference with like self-love and self-forgiveness and self-gratitude. And like, where do you see those practices playing a role in our longevity, in our purpose?
They they have a role. They absolutely have a role. But we still have to understand that our life has a purpose. And if we're going towards what that is, then that's what we have to understand and work with. Like I, when I started grade school, I was so dyslexic, I couldn't read. I had to repeat first grade the second time. I was a class dummy. The teacher called me the class dummy. The kids, he said the same thing. And so my self-image was of the class dummy
Yeah.
until I started third grade. Now, in third grade, the teacher saw something in me that the other one had not seen, because though I couldn't read or write or add or subtract, I could talk. And in the talking, I made friends and I could do things around. So she appointed me class governor. So as
Mm.
class governor, I got to take the message of my class, third grade, into the whole auditorium. And so this one time, the third grade had a play that we were to present to the auditorium, and it was entitled "The Frog Jumped Over the Pond." So my mother made me a frog suit and dyed it green, and I came walking out on the stage in front of the whole student body, and I was really proud. I was going to be able to do this and all
Yeah.
this. But as I walked onto the stage, I saw my two older brothers in the front row, and it threw me off my step just enough that instead of jumping over the pond, I landed in it. And I'm standing there in front of the whole student body. My suit is fading because my mother had used cheap dye to fade.
Yeah.
And I'm crying and I can't move and I'm stuck. I'm really stuck.
Mm.
And the audience is in stitches. They're just dumb, hooting, laughing. It's so funny. And
Mm-hmm.
finally, the teacher comes up and takes me off the stage, and I get through the day, and we get up to our house for the next. And my brothers are at the table telling my mother how funny this was. So she listens to them for a while, and I'm trying to give them the devil's eye, and they're not paying any attention to me. So
Yeah.
my mother finally says, "All right, boys, now you've had your fun. What can we do as a family to help Gladys so anything that happens in the future, she doesn't have people laughing at her, but she's having them laugh with her." Now, that's the kind of mother I had. She had this
Mm.
deep understanding about how you live your life. And for me, the boys were having their fun, but that was done. Then, and I have no idea how what we decided, but I can tell you, I still have the awkward kind of thing that happens with dyslexia. I still trip and fall when I come onto a stage, but I've learned how to take that moment and make some humor at it with it and immediately have the audience in my hand before I've said anything.
Yeah.
And an interesting thing with this too, when we started the American Holistic Medical Association, there was a day when there were 10 of us doctors sitting around a table talking about what we were talking about, and we realized that of the 10 of us, 6 of us were dyslexic.
Mm.
And we looked at each other and we said, well, must be that we had to find the other way of doing this, because how did you learn to read? And most of us said, we don't know. We just had to learn to read and write. We couldn't
Yeah.
have gotten through medical school if we hadn't.
Yeah.
And so we did whatever we had to do. And I can't tell you what I did. They couldn't
Mm-hmm.
either.
No. But you were resilient and you didn't give up. And here you are.
No. And that humor that changed everything, that love changed everything. My mother, it's like the week before she died, she and my dad and I were sitting on our porch and looking out in the garden, and she says to my dad, "John, look at that petunia bush. It must have 500 blossoms on it." And my dad looked at her and he said, "Oh, Beth, it can't have more than 50." And my mother looks at him and she says, "What's another zero?"
Mm. Yeah.
So it's that kind of a gentle humor that really helped me understand how to deal with life.
Mm.
It's such a blessing.
It's like taking it with grace and ease, right?
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
loving it.
No, that's what it comes down to. At the end of the day, these conversations
Yeah,
are so important. I think as humans, we don't understand what love is. We just don't.
No,
And I think we've
we can't put
misdefined
it in
it.
words.
We've
Yeah,
misdiagnosed it, thinking it's Valentine's Day and romantic comedies and chocolates and roses. Those are acts of love. Big
yeah,
difference, right? And that's an act of love for a very specific cause. But love, I believe, is undefinable. And you can tap into it, take action, it's a verb, and apply it how you need it when you need it, as long as you're listening to it.
right. And as long as you're feeling it yourself.
Mm.
I really think that some of these young people who are killing each other in the classrooms, most 19-year-old boys and
Mm.
so on, I think if we if we look at it a little differently, and instead of having guns for the teachers, have guardian dogs in the classroom. If every classroom had a dog, it would be a whole different thing, because if there is a child there who doesn't has never experienced love, so doesn't know what it's like,
Mm.
on the TV he sees a person, his hero, die, but then he comes back to life and die and comes back to life. He doesn't know anything about death, and he doesn't know anything about love. And
Yeah.
so if he's not experienced either, it would be a gift of to the school system to have guardian dogs in the classroom, because that dog would know when a child was hurting and could go and spend time with it, and
Mm-hmm.
the child would learn what love is, because he hasn't, and it's a matter of actually experience the process of love. So I think if we could do that, there has to be somebody who can understand and put that into our school system.
Right. And we see the power of the healing of animals in hospitals
Oh,
now, right? People battling
and yeah,
cancer and
and the armed forces are using it and so on. Why not in our
yeah.
educational system?
But that's true. A lot of these children are hurting and they're not getting the love that they need at home. And a dog loves so unconditionally that could be
Yeah,
their first time ever experiencing love.
ever
That's
experience.
powerful. That is
I think
powerful.
so.
That is powerful.
Yeah. And, they'd be guardian dogs. It would start a whole new profession. The teacher, that first of all, they have to be hypoallergenic, so that the child doesn't get allergies from it. But they have to be trained to do this.
Mm-hmm.
They have to have trainers to do that. The teacher has to be trained. Parents and students have to understand that this is what is part of the training. I mean, the dog is there to teach, and we're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be teaching things in the schools, not just uh, putting guns in the teachers' hands. I mean, come on.
Yeah, that's definitely not the answer. But there's studies and science around. I grew up with dogs my whole life, and I have a
So did
2-year-old,
I.
and yeah, and it's. Sometimes I say that we don't deserve dogs, as human beings. We're so
Yeah.
cruel, and to be cruel to a dog that's so unconditionally loving. But some of the science and some of the studying, like I have a 2-year-old and my dog is a year older, so I wanted to get the dog, then have the kid, and kind of go in that order. And the science says it, like children that are raised with animals and caring for other life other than themselves or their parents do have more opportunities of growing up with that sense of love and
Right.
well-being and compassion and empathy. And it's
And and
important.
and to let the uh, dog be long enough in the family that it spends its life there, and when it
Hmm.
dies, they experience death.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a we it gets so protective of our children sometimes that we don't let them experience the actually juice of life.
No, and I've had that opportunity, and it is powerful. When I was 12, I believe, I had a Doberman, and we had to put him down because he had congestive heart failure. So he only
Uh-huh.
lasted till 6. And I was in the room when we put him under, and till to this day, that was like, I haven't had a lot of humans die around me, but I had a few animals pass that I cared for deeply. And I remember that, and I think it is important. The
It
fragility of
is.
life, the shortness of life. You
Right.
know, may we all be so blessed to live as healthy and as long as possible, but you never know what can happen. And
That's
it's
right.
important to remember that.
That's right.
Tomorrow is not promised,
Uh-uh.
it's not guaranteed.
No. This moment is the important moment. And
Yeah.
as we take the moment and live it, it actually, that moment just died. We are
Mm,
now in another moment and going on. That's the way life works. But
yeah.
if you haven't experienced it, you haven't understood it, then, you know, how are you going to work with it?
Yeah. No. How do you understand it or rationalize
Right.
or figure it out or heal from anything that may happen in that? Because death is inevitable. We're born, and I don't ever say it morbid, but we're guaranteed to die. We're going to die.
It's
So,
part of life.
yeah.
Life and death are part of it. And I, I work a lot with my dreams, and I've helped people to work with their dreams, daydreams and night dreams. And a few years back, I had a dream where I woke up with a crash. And when I'm woke up in the dream, I'm sort of in the dream and out of the dream like you can be. And I saw myself in the high Himalayas in a valley, and on the right hand side was a girl sprayed out on the land, just barely breathing. On the left hand side was a huge man in armor doing the same thing, just barely breathing. And the voice said to me, these two forces have been fighting each with their fists for eons. It's time they opened their fingers and welcomed each other and worked together. And when I actually woke up, I realized that the girl was on the right hand, which is the masculine side, and the man was on the left hand, which is the feminine side. And this is a reality. We've been fighting this battle of the sexes for eons. So I
Hmm.
called this friend of mine who I can talk things over with, and she says, you know, I've been thinking about two words that I think you really need to understand. First of all, manifestation. She says, we manifest when we climb Jacob's ladder. You know, you get a degree, you do that, you buy a house, you manifest. And manifestation is very important.
Hmm.
But she says, I think we as women don't, that's not our job. She says, we have a spiral, and we can be on the on the fifth layer of that spiral and know what's going on down at the second level. And if we try to manifest everything, we're not going to be able to quite do it, and so we'll be, you know, it's not our job. So it's the process of bringing our hands together so that our fingers interlock, and they know how they love each other, and we can understand the differences and not try to be the other. I mean,
Mm,
my right hand can't be my left hand, but we can do the work that we can do together if we pull it
yeah.
together. And she says, I think the word that we could use for this is femifestation. It's a
Mm,
great word. I'm using that all the time. A
yeah.
pregnancy is a total femifestation. It's the in fact most every creative thing that we manifest has had to be femifested before it could get manifest. I mean, it's
Mm,
this process of life's flow and love. The
yeah.
movement of love as it moves from femifestation into manifestation, and life goes on.
Mm. No, and that story reminds me of this art piece I've created a few years ago. I call it Humanity. It's two hands intertwined, and one arm is white and one arm is black, and it's got my art, love, on each side. So it's a slight nod to, the differences within black and white, but let's live in the gray zone and let's stop looking at that. I'm actually going to
Right.
pivot over here so you can see it. It is right there.
Okay.
So I
Uh-huh.
call that Humanity.
I told
So
you, didn't I, that the Indian kids rubbed my arms
yeah,
to try and
yeah,
get the white
nope,
off?
yeah. That's funny.
Isn't
That's
that
funny. And
lovely?
that's the innocence of being a child, right?
Oh,
And there's proof time and time again that we see past that because we're like, oh, you're this. Let's darken you up or let's lighten you up, like all in jest and play because they're like, let's look like each other.
yeah, yeah,
But it's all out of innocence and love.
yeah, yeah.
But thank you so much for your time so far. As we start wrapping up and concluding, I've got a couple final questions for you. One question being, knowing we cannot go back and change anything, right? Because then we
Yeah,
wouldn't be who we are today.
yeah.
But if you were to look back, is there anything you wish you had known or done differently when you were younger?
Oh, yes. I can a litany of things, but the big one is when I was in medical school, and we were taught twilight sleep for birthing, and it was the only way that it was done. The woman was totally anesthetized, so she couldn't feel anything because the idea, I think when men came into the process of helping with birthing, the way a woman howls and yells when she's in labor just
Mm-hmm.
it just is too much, and so they came up with the idea that we could anesthetize the woman completely so that she can't feel anything. My first two
Mm.
babies I had that way, but I
Wow.
was able, with the work that I was taught, to do birthings with with forceps. So we delivered babies. We didn't. The mothers. We've taken away the power that women have, which is our very essence. We can birth babies. We don't
Yeah.
need to be delivered with from the baby. It's
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
we're still calling it delivery. I'm still finding myself having to catch myself from saying, "Oh yeah, I delivered you." You know, when I find a person who I was one of the babies that I helped birth, but but at that time it was the best we could do.
Yeah.
I mean, I
But
couldn't let that baby die in utero
no.
because it couldn't get out. So
But so
it
you
was
were the
my job.
receiver, though, if you think about it, right?
What?
You were the receiver. The receiver.
Yeah, I was helping the mother birth her baby. It's what
Mm-hmm.
I had to teach the Afghanistan women. When I went to Afghanistan, I had to teach the women something, because they didn't know. And if it comes from uh, not knowledge, not understanding knowledge, and the problem was that the knowledge that we were working with was true science because the baby was born without any problems, we thought, and so on and so forth. And the mother
Mm-hmm.
didn't experience anything except going to sleep. And
Yeah.
so it's that, yes, there are things like that I have done out of ignorance or out of just the way things are done
Mm.
in those times or whatever. But yeah, but you learn from these. They're learning experience. I didn't
Yeah.
do them because I was unhappy with the mother or the baby or anything else. It was what we were taught.
Yeah. That's what you were taught. Now, is there a personal life philosophy or motto that you live by every day?
Yeah, love. It's that simple.
Simple. Yeah. And is there a message of hope or inspiration that you'd like to leave with our listeners?
Yes, it's look for the light, not for the darkness, because they're both there. And if you look for
Yeah.
the light, you'll find it. You really will. It's there. The sun comes up every morning, and so does the moon come up at night, except when she's not supposed to. And
Mm-hmm.
it's the movement of light and love is essential for our
Yes.
being.
Mm-hmm. And the final question, Dr. McGarey, how do you define living a life through love?
By being able to really tell myself that what I'm doing is a loving act.
Mm.
It's if I like the guy in the grocery store, you know, uh, if I had gone in and put more emphasis on what I had done wrong, I would I would not have allowed him the experience of going home and saying he met this nasty old lady and they could have a big laugh. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a matter of seeing joy and happiness in actions, not the dire consequences.
Mm-hmm. You're like, the cranky old lady. She told me she was older, didn't want my help. No, it's funny. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much. Thank you for everything. Thank you for taking the time and sharing your story and your wisdom and your insights.
Well,
I
thank
truly
you
believe,
for having me.
yeah, and the pleasure's mine. And you've got this book. We will link it all up. But The Well-Lived Life, a 102-year-old doctor's 6 secrets to health, happiness at every age. Although you're going to be 103. Here's the book, and we'll make sure we link it up with everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to Live Through Love. If you love this episode, you'll love this episode.